Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Don Arleth, and welcome to our main edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. Russian attacks on civilians in Ukraine continue. Today, a Reuters journalist was killed and a Polish volunteer was injured in one of those attacks. Meanwhile, the United States has imposed further sanctions on entities supporting Vladimir Putin's war. That's coming up in just a minute, but first off, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Hezbollah attacked Israel on Sunday morning, but Israel, in anticipation, carried out a preemptive strike. In Germany, local elections are 1 week away, and the right-wing populist Alternative for Germany has a chance of winning them. They were supposed to be there for a few months, but they will stay until next year. 2 astronauts are stuck in space. 2 firefighters have been killed while battling a blaze in the city of Poznan in western Poland. The 2 were hit by an explosion when trying to extinguish a fire in an apartment building. Hailed as heroes, the pair was honored in cities across the country as the sound of sirens filled the air. The families of the fallen heroes will receive state support moving forward, said Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The Polish President Andrzej Duda also commented on the incident, saying he had hoped the 2 would still be alive until the last seconds of the rescue operation. 14 other people were injured in the incident, 11 of them firefighters. The explosion sent pieces of concrete and glass flying in all directions at high speed, cutting through fabric and flesh. While all have sustained serious injuries, hospital officials say they're in serious but stable condition and will eventually recover. The Ukrainian offensive in Russia's Kursk region continues to advance as Moscow's troops make headway near the Ukrainian cities of Toretsk and Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, Russian missiles have struck yet another civilian target, this time damaging a hotel in Kramatorsk and injuring a journalist covering the ongoing war. One of them is dead.
In the middle of the night, out of nowhere, the city of Kramatorsk was hit by what onlookers believe was a Russian Iskander missile. With Moscow's artillery using this much force to destroy civilian infrastructure, it's a miracle no one has been reported dead after the attack. Some people, however, were heavily injured. 2 Reuters journalists were wounded. Another person wounded by the missile's impact is Monika Andruszewska, a Polish volunteer working to help Ukrainians affected by the Russian invasion. Meanwhile, Russian military officials claim to be attacking Ukrainian positions in Russia's Kursk region. Russian officials have also announced the creation of the Kursk volunteer detachment to try and stop Ukraine's rapid advance. Despite this, Kyiv's troops show no intention of stopping.
First of all, I am very positive about the course of the operation in the Kursk region. The operation is difficult. It is important that it goes according to our plan. There have already been some results of the operation, including those that I cannot share with you.
The situation on the front lines isn't all roses, however. While Ukrainian troops held their positions in the Luhansk region, residents of the frontline towns in the neighboring Donetsk region had to be evacuated due to the Russian advance.
I'm scared, very scared. We are already going for a second war. Why has God left us?
Analysts say another objective of the Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region is to draw Russian forces in Ukraine away from the front lines, as well as destroy supply lines of the Russian army. To help with that effort, Kyiv's ally, Washington, decided to sanction 400 extra entities that are aiding Russia's war in Ukraine, including Chinese firms that ship machine tools and microelectronics to Russia.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has jokingly told his Polish counterpart, Andrzej Duda, that he may not answer his phone call. Now, Duda said he would call Zelensky and ask him not to attack Russian forces if they are retreating. Let's take a look.
Zelensky's improvised quip, which made Duda and journalists laugh, came when the 2 were talking to the press after attending events to mark the 33rd anniversary of Ukraine's Independence Day on Saturday. Duda was talking about a hypothetical situation in which Russian troops withdrew from Ukraine.
If it happens that Ukrainian troops will attack retreating Russian troops, which will clearly be retreating, I will be the first to pick up the phone and call President Volodymyr Zelensky and say, don't bomb them when they are retreating. Leave them alone, let them go home.
What if my phone is busy? That's how it is. I'm the president. You can call and my phone may be busy. That's how it is.
I will keep calling until I get through.
The conversation was held as 115 Ukrainian soldiers were returned in a prisoner swap with Russia, and as Ukrainian forces continue to make advances into Russia's Kursk region. This is the first invasion of Russian territory since World War II.
Sometimes we need it. Moving on now, Israel and Hezbollah exchanged fire late last night in one of the largest chapters of the two forces' borderland tit-for-tat. The Israeli forces forestalled the Iranian-backed Shia group, despite its leader's claim that Hezbollah rockets had reached their targets. More in this next report.
The skies over Lebanon and Israel lit up again Saturday night. The flashes came as Hezbollah rockets and drones were shot down and Tel Aviv's fighter jets struck the armed organization's rocket launchers. It was initially difficult to determine who pressed the button first. The Israeli military said it launched a preemptive strike, scrambling some 100 fighter jets and neutralizing thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers in what it called an act of self-defense to prevent an even larger attack. On its part, the Iran-backed Shia Muslim armed group said it had fired more than 320 Katyusha rockets at 11 Israeli military bases and barracks, including the Meron base and 4 sites in the occupied Golan Heights. Hezbollah deemed the operation successful, calling it the first phase of a retaliatory attack on Israel in vengeance for the assassination of Commander Fuad Shukr in late July. The Israeli military, however, remains undaunted in the face of Hezbollah's threats.
I remind you that Hezbollah is an extension of the Iranians. They are financed and armed by the Iranians. Most of our activity at the moment is in southern Lebanon, but we will attack anywhere in Lebanon where there is a threat to the state of Israel.
On the morning after the exchange of hostilities, many may have wondered if things would escalate.
It seems that all depends on what happens in Cairo today and tomorrow.
Negotiations on a potential truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza are ongoing in Cairo. No consensus has been reached so far.
As festival goers and local residents continue to lay flowers at the site of the Solingen knife attack, Germany's far-right politicians and pundits have been keen to take advantage of this situation and use it to propel their anti-migrant rhetoric.
Hundreds gathered for a memorial service at a church in Solingen in western Germany after a knife attack on Friday night left 3 people dead and several others injured.
Why this had to happen, why innocent people had to die, why the borders where they entered were not thoroughly checked.
On Friday night, an attacker knifed passers-by, seemingly at random, during a festival celebrating the 650th anniversary of the founding of the city of Solingen. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack.
We don't know much yet, but one thing we do know is that this attack struck at the heart of our country. This attack was intended to spread terror among people celebrating peacefully together.
Even before any details were known, the far-right Alternative for Germany party was framing the incident as a migrant attack.
Yourselves. Finally put an end to the wrong path of forced multiculturalization. Protect your children. Send the responsible parties into oblivion.
The attack came just days before regional elections in Saxony and Thuringia, and during a time when the AfD is polling at a historic high. The party is currently leading the polls in Thuringia and going neck and neck with the centrist CDU in Saxony.
The AfD is a party of resentment, a party of people who are not happy with what is going around and want a radical change, an easy change, a simple change, and just want simple solutions because they're so angry and so disappointed.
The AfD has been embroiled in several scandals in recent months. In June, 3 AfD politicians allied with an openly neo-Nazi party, Die Heimat, for local elections. The AfD's top candidate in Thuringia, Björn Höcke, was also convicted of violating Germany's ban on the use of Nazi slogans after ending a speech with the words, "Everything for Germany." The AfD's incendiary rhetoric and involvement in multiple scandals have sparked several protests. More than 4,000 people demonstrated in Erfurt on Sunday, rallying against the far right and urging voters to cast their ballots against the AfD.
Hungarian officials are firing back at critics who are voicing concern over Budapest's recent decision to ease entry requirements into the Schengen area for Russian and Belarusian citizens. The Hungarian national card system enables citizens of Russia and Belarus to gain entry into the EU's visa-free zone within just 21 days of application.
In July, the Hungarian government decided to extend its national card scheme to include citizens of 2 countries the EU officially wants nothing to do with, Russia and Belarus. What this means is that Russians and Belarusians alongside their families can enter the EU with the greatest of ease, stay out for 2 years, and if necessary, extend their stay by another 3 years. This move, which came shortly after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's visit to Moscow, cemented other EU leaders' belief that Budapest's friendly attitude towards Russia might bring about the end of visa-free travel inside the bloc.
De facto, by the content of its actions, Hungary is doing everything that benefits Russia, trying to destabilize the situation in the EU.
Hungarian officials, however, say otherwise. In their words, the national card scheme will hardly impact the security situation in the Schengen area.
I want to tell you this here, because today there are just over 1 million Russian citizens in the European Union. There are 7,000 of them in Hungary.
This data lines up with the latest polls depicting the number of Russian citizens in the EU as of 2023. Hungary does indeed find itself close to the bottom of the list in terms of how many Russians reside there, with Germany being the #1 destination for Russian citizens. However, critics of the relaxed regulations say the problem isn't the Russians and Belarusians already inside the bloc, but those who could be encouraged to enter it by Hungary's national card scheme. Since July, Budapest has already approved 7 out of 33 applications made by citizens of those 2 countries, with more surely on the way.
Co-founder and CEO of the messaging service Telegram, Pavel Durov, has been detained by French authorities. He was reportedly arrested in connection with the spread of illicit content via the Telegram messaging and social media app.
The Russia-born billionaire was taken into custody by French police after he stepped off his private jet at an airport north of Paris. He had been facing an arrest warrant for offences related to a lack of moderators, purportedly facilitating criminal use of Telegram.
Telegram is famously, or if you'd rather use that term, notoriously, reluctant to censor anything that happens on its network, meaning that you will find dissidents, you will find independent journalists, you will find terrorists, and you will find criminals spreading their messages on the network.
Telegram, a social media platform with nearly 1 billion users, is particularly popular in countries of the former Soviet bloc. The app has been extensively used as a tool in the war between Russia and Ukraine. It was banned in Russia in 2018, but the ban was lifted in 2021.
If we take under consideration that Telegram is accessible in both Ukraine and Russia, it should be restricted somehow because of so-called cooperation with Russia.
The arrest could also be seen as a warning signal sent to other social media operators, as the EU countries have been exerting more pressure on tech giants, demanding better content filtering, and the accusations against Durov are not to be trifled with.
It appears that he might be charged with extremely serious offenses, such as drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, etc., etc. Of course, nobody says that he himself is a terrorist. It's just that his network has made it easier to commit crime on a wide scale.
The detention prompted a response from Elon Musk, CEO of another social media platform X, who has repeatedly been slammed for letting hate speech thrive on X, formerly known as Twitter. The arrest has already been used by Russian propaganda. Though Durov holds dual French and Emirati citizenship, it was the Russian embassy in France that demanded that Durov's rise be ensured, with Russian diplomats claiming to be in contact with Durov's lawyer.
Now let's zoom out from planet Earth for just a moment and take a closer look at the unusual case of two NASA astronauts. The duo is currently on the International Space Station, under which normal circumstances would be a very understandable reason for them to be over the moon. This time, however, things are a bit different. Here's more.
Hi, Bon. Air to ground 1. How you read me?
The stay of two veteran NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, aboard the International Space Station will extend well beyond the planned 8-day test mission of Boeing's Starliner rocket, according to a decision made by several senior NASA officials and Boeing representatives during a meeting Saturday morning in Houston.
NASA has decided that Butch and Suni will return with Crew 9 next February. And that Starliner will return uncrewed. The decision to keep Butch and Suni aboard the International Space Station and bring the Boeing Starliner home uncrewed is a result of a commitment to safety.
The vessel's capsule will return to Earth unmanned due to thruster failures during Starliner's first approach to the ISS in June and multiple helium leaks. The two astronauts will be brought home aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft in February 2025. It is scheduled to launch in September as part of a routine astronaut rotation mission.
Shortly behind by Commander of Starliner, Butch Wilmore.
NASA's decision to turn to SpaceX for help may be an uncomfortable one for rival Boeing. The company had hoped the test mission would redeem its troubled Starliner program after years of development problems and more than $1.6 billion in budget overruns since 2016.
Back here on Earth, Poland is now baking in heat after a bout of storms that shook the country. Amid the searingly hot weather, the country's meteorological office has issued extensive heat warning.
Following a record-breaking precipitation that put Polish capital Warsaw underwater at the beginning of the week, Poland has found itself in the midst of a heat wave, with the mercury hitting over 30 degrees Celsius in the eastern and southern parts of the country.
It is really hot, especially yesterday. Last few days, it's been really hot and it's too much.
In the scorchingly hot weather, it is vital to avoid the sun.
In Warsaw, it's too hot, but it's like we're walking around near river, in parks, under the trees, and it's okay.
The elderly and children may be more vulnerable to the extreme weather conditions. Also, when enjoying physical activity, it is important to take into account the heat factor.
Go outside, take a run, maybe take a bike ride, but it's really hot. I recommend taking water.
But not everyone is that bothered by the sweltering heat, as they seem to know how to deal with this kind of weather.
With water. Plenty of water, walking along at the bank with the shade of the trees, and to be honest, I come from England. It's cold, it's wet, this is lovely, so I'm not complaining.
Yet, even though some people might be enjoying the hot weather while on holiday, it has not been fun for regions gripped by wildfires, with the recent example of Portugal's Madeira. According to a 2024 study by Nature, Europe faces up to a tenfold increase in extreme fires in a warming climate.
When she was born, she was 175 centimeters tall and weighed 49 kilograms. The spectacular tufts on her head were the reason for her name Pietruszka, which means parsley in Polish. The Warsaw Zoo's newest resident, a baby giraffe, can now be seen by visitors.
Pietruszka was born nearly 7 weeks ago, on the 9th of July, but the Warsaw Zoo did not announce her birth until mid-August.
Although everything looked good at first, Pietruszka was rejected by her mother a few hours after birth, so we made the decision to separate them and nurse Pietruszka ourselves.
Hand-rearing giraffe calves is a very challenging and time-consuming process, and Pietruszka's carers have to be around at all times.
The biggest problem is with feeding. A young calf often doesn't have the instinct to suckle, so it's hard to get it to eat.
Pietruszka's carers are currently working on an enclosure where she could spend time outside before she is reunited with her family. If all goes according to plan, visitors will be able to see her as early as September. Currently, there are 4 grown giraffes living at the Warsaw Zoo, 1 male and 3 females. The giraffe population has declined by 40% over the last 4 decades. Fewer than 70,000 savanna giraffes live in Africa. The subspecies of Ugandan giraffe represented by Pietruszka and her family is among the most endangered, with fewer than 2,000 Ugandan giraffes left in the wild. For TVP World, Gabriela Fesnak.
Well, that was a beautiful but sad story that shows how mankind is destroying the environment around them and trampling on biodiversity. Meanwhile, more than a dozen people died today in floods in Turkey and Indonesia. People also died in Brazil because of wildfires. Poland recently struggled with downpours and storms, and today the heat. The climate is changing, becoming more and more unpredictable and dangerous, but not everyone thinks it's our fault. Now for a discussion on the environment and what we can do to protect the world that is crucial for our own survival, my guests tonight are Julia Sidaiko, energy analyst from Polityka Insight, and Joanna Kędzierska, energy and climate journalist. Hello to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So, Julia, let's start with you. They say that we have 4 years, 330 days left to limit the warming of the planet by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Will we be able to make it in time, or is this some looming threat that's going to be a threat for not only our children, but definitely for our grandchildren and further generations?
So the 1.5 frontier, let's say, is I would say it has a great political importance to it, but in terms of our adaptation to climate change as we experience it already, it is not as important. I mean, we're probably not yet exactly at 1.5, although it's all but certain that we will pass that important barrier. But even now, we are already experiencing extreme weather of an extent unseen ever before. Just to give you some data on the recent developments, we now have a confirmation that July was the 14th consecutive month with temperature record breaking, and that 14-month streak was also the longest streak ever recorded, surpassing the one we had from May 2015 to May 2016. So while heat waves are perhaps, especially since they are sort of always happening around holidays, the summer months, they are kind of easy to take, even if they are becoming more and more unbearable. They are still not as catastrophic as perhaps hurricanes or, I don't know, earthquakes, but heat waves have a very strong and clear impact on public health. Heat has killed 47,000 people in Europe in 2023 alone. So I feel that the understanding among the public opinion, but also politicians, of the risks related to heat waves are becoming more and more clear. And when it comes, for example, to the downpour we had in Warsaw not a week ago that you mentioned a moment ago, it only took a few hours for scientists in a EU project, it's called Climameter, to determine that climate change had a very strong impact on that extreme weather. Climate change wasn't the only thing shaping that situation, but it had the strongest impact. So we know a lot more, and we can understand how climate change is happening already. Really across the world, not
right now. Yes. Now, Joanna, do you believe that we are kind of at a little too little, a little too late as far as preventing some of these dire predictions about climate change?
We are much far too late, frankly speaking, and we actually will definitely exceed the threshold of 1.5, and we will for sure exceed the threshold of 2 degrees, what was set by scientists as a threshold which we shouldn't exceed if it comes to our security, because more than 2 degrees Celsius is actually put our life at stake. We will definitely, bearing in mind the latest estimations of scientists, and over 90% of domestic climate policies, we won't be able to keep the temperature below 2 Celsius. 2 degrees Celsius, because we are far too late, and we do not do enough to cut greenhouse gases emissions, and that's what we have right now. And we should be prepared for the new normality, what means more extreme weather events, more heat waves, more floods, flash floods, especially in our cities, because what our cities are actually. I'm so sorry. Concrete jungles, which are completely not prepared to take that much water we have to take right now. We should just, accept that this is our new normality, because first of all, we do not do enough to mitigate climate change, and we do not do anything in practice to adapt to climate change, because, climate change means changing conditions, and those are new conditions, which in fact are our new normality, which are completely not prepared. I don't mean only Warsaw, I mean actually all cities around the world, because as you mentioned in the in this material before, flash floods, heat waves, like wildfires, this is actually, those are phenomena which are now around the world, everywhere, in fact. Yes, we look news and we see those extreme events everywhere around the world.
Now, Julia, are we doing enough? And if we look at everything that's being done here in Europe, or say in the West in general, to combat climate change, there's still a large portion of the world's population in China and India and in the global South that aren't heeding this emergency quite the same way. And I'm going to ask you to be very brief. How do we combat this challenge?
We combat this challenge together by going two ways at the same time. Mitigation, obviously, slashing greenhouse gas emissions. You mentioned China. It's true that China is perhaps, not perhaps, China is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, but they are developing clean energy very fast, and they are developing clean tech very fast. So that picture is not as clear. And the other way I mentioned a moment ago is adaptation. Adaptation is extremely important. Right now, I feel that politicians are seeing more and more clearly that they cannot escape the subject of adaptation, because the costs of extreme weather are going to be more and more pronounced by it. But just commenting on what Joanna said a moment ago, there's a huge difference between 2 degrees Celsius and 2.1 degree Celsius. There's a huge difference between 2 and 2.5 degrees Celsius. So mitigation, despite us passing threshold after threshold, mitigation continues to be the most important thing we can continue to do to combat the climate crisis.
Okay, Julia Sidejko, energy analyst at Politica Insight, and of course, Joanna Kędzierska, energy and climate journalist. Thank you both for weighing in on this issue. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.